Hello everyone and welcome to Tom's Tomb of Horror as I share my top 10 favourite horror films of this past year of 2025. And I have to say I've not seen nearly as many horror films as I usually would in a calendar year, but the ones I have seen I think have been pretty high quality. I would agree with a lot of people or a lot of YouTubers that I've seen that have already said that they think this is a really strong year. This has been a strong year for horror. And based on, I think, a lot of theatrical releases, I would agree with them. And I think some of my picks within this top 10 list that I've got have been some of the strongest films, not just of the year, but of the decade as well. We've had some great horror, I think, released in 2025. Do let me know what your favourite picks of the year were in the comments, maybe your top 10s, your top 5s, or just your favourite horror film of the whole year. I'd be interested to hear from you, particularly as I don't think I've checked out nearly as much as I usually would have done in a full year. So, yeah, I look forward to reading your comments and, maybe let me know any horror films you think I've missed from this list that I would really enjoy, and I look forward to checking those out. Otherwise, if you're new to the channel, please do drop a like and a sub. It really supports everything I do here on Tom's Tomb of Horror. And yeah, without any further wasting of time, let me start my countdown of my top 10 horror films of 2025 with my number 10, which is The Gorge, which stars Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller. And in fact, it's kind of not really, it's not a pure horror film. This is kind of like an amalgamation, I'd say, of genres here. You've got some action elements, some fantasy elements, some romance. And I thought this film was honestly at its strongest in its early portion when it was Anya Taylor-Joy on one side of the gorge and Miles Teller on the other side of the gorge, where they were sort of, trying to communicate with each other, and they had that kind of blossoming romance. And whilst the film was in that stage, I thought the film was at its strongest when it kind of diverted and they both went into the gorge on this kind of like more action adventure discovery kind of thing. I thought the film lost some kind of lost my interest a bit there. I thought it was definitely at its strongest in those earlier scenes, but for me, yeah, this one lost its way a little bit, but I still enjoyed it. It's still why it's made my number 10 on my list. That's The Gorge at number 10. So coming in at number 9, I've got a slow burn slasher that was released on Shudder called Night of the Reaper. This was directed by Brendan Christensen, who you might know. He also directed Superhost from 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And I enjoyed that film. I thought this was very, even though it was slow burn, it was rewarding. I thought that, the twists were rewarding at the end. The payoff was good. Even though there was an element, I thought you could kind of predict where it was going to go. I still thought it was surprising enough to be exciting. I thought Jessica Clement was really good in the lead role here as well. I thought she was really good. So yeah, overall, I thought although it was a slow burn slasher, it was a good one. It was a bit of an underdog from 2025, which is why Night of the Reaper comes in here at number 9. Now at number 8, I've got Companion, an early release from this year, which starred Sophie Thatcher, who I think has been excellent in a lot of the recent films I've seen her in, such as Heretic from last year, from 2024. And also, I thought she was really good in The Boogeyman from 2023, and she just seems to go from strength to strength. I really like her in this film, and also Jack Quaid's performance too. And this is about kind of, it's got that AI theme. And I will say, if you saw the trailer to this film, I think it kind of slightly spoiled one of the bigger twists, although I think you could kind of see that twist coming anyway. But yeah, Companion was a really fun film. Yeah, very strong performances, and yeah, a good kind of artificial intelligence-y type film to come out in 2025. That's why Companion makes it to my number 8. At number 7, I've got an instalment from the big horror franchise Final Destination. This was Final Destination 6, Final Destination Bloodlines. And this was surprisingly a really good entry this late in the franchise. Most horror franchises, by you get the later and later you get in the sequels, the kind of worse they tend to get sometimes. But this was really good, a good comeback for Final Destination. And that's partly because I thought it had some strong performances in, particularly from the likes of Older Iris. I also liked the final girl, I think, in this one, who I thought was very good too, Stephanie. And, yeah, I liked its unique spin with the whole genealogy, the whole kind of family history element as well, and the idea of the curse, the Final Destination curse passing down family lines. I really liked that element to this too, and it gave it a slightly newer flavour to former films, whilst also delivering well on kills, on stunts, on certain scenes that I thought had some emotional level to them as well. This was a really good, well-rounded Final Destination film. Bloodlines therefore comes in here at number 7. Next up at number 6, I've got a film which will be a lot higher and will probably be number 1 on many of your lists, I suspect, because it was hugely popular. That is Sinners, the Ryan Coogler directed film, which I think stylistically and in audio-visual terms certainly is, a really strong film. And it's why it's made my number 6. I think stylistically, as a filmmaker's film, if you like, it's an absolute masterpiece. I think it's a stunning movie. Great performances again in this one from like Michael Jordan and Haley Steinfeld. I thought was great in this too. I can see why it's had the critical acclaim it has, and I thought I particularly enjoyed the blues music underpinning this one throughout, as well as the story, which I liked too, which had a lot to unpick. I almost found it lost me a little bit towards the end. I'd have to rewatch this one, I think, to be fair to it. But what a great film. It only comes in at number 6 simply because the next 5 films I think I'm more likely to rewatch more regularly, but don't take that away from Sinners. I'd understand if Sinners was your number 1. What an absolutely amazing film from 2025. Now we move on to my top 5 of the year as we get towards my favourite horror film of the year. But my number 5 here is Dangerous Animals. A really good sort of... to me, a bit of a crossover of Wolf Creek, sort of Australian serial killer film, and Jaws. It's felt like a crossover of the two. You've got this psychopath who essentially enjoys feeding people to sharks. And in this film, he's got this obsession and he kidnaps a couple of young women. And I think Hasse Harrison's a really good, she's the kind of final girl in this film. I think she's excellent. You root for her, and she manages to make you root for her, I think, too, and get invested. But Jai Courtney is great as the villain, as the shark-feeding serial killer. He's sadistic, he's got that mean streak. And there's a nasty streak to this film. There were moments that made me think of Eli Roth films here, too, with the brutality and the intensity of a couple of the kills in this film, which were very gory, very brutal, and kind of nasty. With people that don't deserve the deaths that they get here either. So it's kind of had a brutal, nasty streak to it as well. But I really enjoyed Dangerous Animals. Very enthralling, very engaging horror film from 2025. Comes in here at number 5. Next up at number 4. In fact, I'm surprised this is only number 4 in a way, but it's just how it's worked out. And it's an amazing film called The Long Walk, which is quite minimalist. The Long Walk. It's a Stephen King adaptation, I believe, and it is very much a minimalist kind of film in the sense that the whole film is these kids walking along a road. If they slow down below a certain speed, it's apparently, I think, 4.8 kilometers an hour, then they're shot dead. So it's got sort of, that's the kind of horror element to this. And there are actually some really quite nasty kills in this film as well, despite that kind of minimalist setup with, people, these young lads essentially being shot if they slow down. And given that they're walking such a long walk, that's the competition. There's this TV events element as well. It's this dystopian society. There's a lot of pressure on these guys to keep up their pace, which ramps up the stakes. And David Johnson and Cooper Hoffman, who are in the 2 lead roles, they develop a bond as they're walking, and that bond gets stronger and stronger. The emotional investment of you as the viewer gets stronger as you go through the film. It ups the stakes, ups the ante, and makes this one for a really strong film. As I say, I'm surprised I've only put this one in at number 4 in a way. This was a great film. Given its minimalist setup, it really achieved what I think it set out to, and that's why Long Walk comes in here at number 4. Now at number 3, we've got a film which has the advantage of the recency effect in that I've only very recently seen this one. This was the sequel to 2022's Influencer. Was it 2022 or 2023? One of those years, but Influencer, directed by Curtis David Harder. I think this is an independent film, horror film, and this sequel is fantastic. It is absolute chaos at times, but it expands nicely on the original film by the way it develops its 2 main leads, sort of the protagonist in Madison and the antagonist in CW, the mysterious, conniving, manipulating CW, played by Cassandra Nord absolutely brilliantly, I think, here. And they bring in more modern social media elements, but I think Curtis Davis Harder, the way he brings in the modern social media stuff doesn't feel forced at all. This all feels like it's natural the way that, no, it's not natural what some of the characters are doing, but it's natural the way that the social media is blended into the film. It feels stylistically strong. And as I say, I think the performances are tremendous. The last act is almost a little too crazy. Otherwise, given how much I love this film, how much it had on my edge of the seat, had me on the edge of my seat for almost its entire duration, it could have been my number one just because of how much I enjoyed it. But the last scene was a little, got almost in a too silly direction. However, I think all the actors did a grand job holding down their performances here. In an underdog film, I think, too. So I think Jonathan Whitesell was great as well as Jacob. Just shout him out too as the kind of manosphere guy. But yeah, Influencers. Awesome, awesome film from 2025. If you've seen Influencer but you haven't seen the sequel yet, check that one out. I think it's on Shudder. Excellent. Really good fun. In at number 2 was the surprise of the year for me, just because I got late to this film. I'd heard a lot of mixed reviews, but when I saw it, I knew I loved it. That is 28 Years Later, directed by Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland. I loved this entry in the 28 series. I thought it was really, really good. It's unexpectedly moving. Visually, it's also unexpectedly dreamy and eerie in delivery, but that for me served this film quite well in the way it felt like a little bit of a fever dream in the film's stylistics and its approach to, its the music and the visuals. But overall, unpredictable and fascinating I found this film, and that's what I really liked about it, was that the story arc, I couldn't tell where it was going to go and where it went to. I still found like kept me engaged. And Jodie Comer I thought was terrific, as well as Alfie Williams. I think Alfie Williams was the kid. He was amazing too. The mother-son thing was a really emotional point too in the film. I mean, 28 Years Later for me ticks a lot of the boxes of things I enjoy anyway, and I loved it. It comes in at number 2. Maybe you didn't like that one. I did think the last scene was a little strange, which is why it's not quite made my number 1. But my number 1 film, I'm sure many of you out there enjoyed as well. I've seen this as number 1 on a few other YouTuber lists, a few other horror tuber lists. This is Weapons. This is the Zach Cregger directed film, and Zach Cregger at the moment, I feel like he's in a rich vein of form. Whatever he's doing is turning to gold, and given that he's got Resident Evil, it seems now, I'm hopeful about Resident Evil, but Weapons was just incredible. I knew it was going to be my number 1 horror film of the year when I walked out of the theatre, when I walked out of the cinema. I just knew. It was just so good. You know, the whole idea, this mystery element to it, that you've got a group of kids that go missing at a particular time of night, is in and of itself intriguing. And everything else around that, the story developments around that, and Zach Cregger's own interesting non-chronological style, the way he introduces reveals through characters' eyes, through characters' stories, their separate stories, and you find things out in that slightly jagged but fascinating way, keeps the mystery alive right until near the end of the film. And oh my god, Julia Garner as Justine and Josh Brolin as Archer, both for me equally deserving of awards. What an amazing film. What a fantastic film. That is why Weapons is my number 1 horror film of 2025. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm looking forward to what 2026 has on offer for horror. I hope I get to see many more films than I did in 2025. Let me know your favourites, as I say, in the comments. Otherwise, from me, until next time on Tom's Tomb, enjoy the New Year celebrations, and it's bye for now.